Excuse me, ma'am, do I know you? I'm sorry, but you look so familiar. You need to walk away from here. Please just go, but your eyes. I've seen those eyes before. Mom, is that you? Don't say that name out loud. Not here, not ever. You lied to me. For 8 years you told me she was fine. She wasn't fine. She was here. You knew. You knew and you let this happen. Marcus Whitfield stepped out of his black sedan at the edge of a rain-soaked street he hadn't planned on visiting. He had just landed at LaGuardia after a red-eye from London, and he was supposed to be heading to his hotel in Midtown for a board meeting the next morning. Instead, he had asked the driver to make a detour through the old neighborhood, the one he hadn't set foot in for nearly a decade. It was a small indulgence, a quiet nostalgia, a quick drive past the block where he had grown up before the meetings, the handshakes, the champagne toasts of another closed deal. But standing on that cracked sidewalk, briefcase in hand, he saw something that made his chest tighten in a way no boardroom ever had. An elderly woman was pushing a rusted shopping cart out of a homeless shelter, her coat torn at the elbows, her gray hair tangled beneath a knit hat that had seen too many winters. And in the amber light of the setting sun, her face turned toward him for just a moment. And Marcus Whitfield felt the ground shift beneath his polished shoes. Welcome to today's story. If you enjoy emotional stories about family, secrets, and the truths we're forced to confront, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe for more unforgettable stories like this one. And before we go any further, let me know in the comments where in the world you're watching from. I love hearing from every corner of it. Marcus was 39 years old, and by every measurable standard, he had made it. He was the founder and chief executive of a global consulting firm that had offices in 7 cities. He had appeared on the cover of a business magazine 2 years earlier under the headline, "The Quietest Billionaire You've Never Heard Of." His name was known in circles he had never dreamed of entering as a child. And yet, standing there on that street in Queens, watching the taillights of his sedan drift toward the corner, he felt smaller than he had in years. He had left New York 8 years ago. He remembered the exact day. He had packed 2 suitcases, kissed his mother on the forehead, and promised her he would be back for Christmas. But Christmas had come and gone many times since then. There had always been another quarter to close, another client to win, another expansion to announce. He called when he could. He wired money every month like clockwork, sometimes doubling it during the holidays. He hired a caretaker service through a firm his brother had recommended. He convinced himself he was being a good son. Deep down, though, he had always known that money was the easy part. Presence was the hard part, and he had chosen the easy one. His mother's name was Ruth Whitfield. She had raised him alone after his father passed when Marcus was 11 years old. She had worked 2 jobs, one cleaning offices downtown after dark, and another as a lunch aide at the elementary school around the corner. She had never once complained. She had never once asked him for anything except that he study hard and treat other people with dignity. When Marcus received his scholarship to attend business school out west, Ruth had cried the entire drive to the airport. She had held his face in her hands and told him she was the proudest mother in the borough. He remembered that moment now, standing on the wet sidewalk, watching the elderly woman with the cart pause under the awning of a bodega across the street. Her shoulders were hunched against the wind. Her fingers, wrapped in fingerless gloves, gripped the handle of the cart tightly. And something about the way she tilted her head, the way she seemed to talk quietly to herself, made his heart begin to pound in a way he could not explain. Marcus told himself he was being foolish. New York was full of elderly women pushing carts. It was one of the sad, unchanging truths of the city. Every neighborhood had someone the world had forgotten. He was tired. He was jet-lagged. He was letting his imagination run away from him because he was standing 3 blocks from the apartment building where he had grown up. That was all. He forced himself to look away, to reach for his phone, to call the driver back around and continue on to the hotel. His thumb hovered over the screen, but he did not press the button. Instead, he found himself walking, slowly at first, then with more purpose. Across the street, past a shuttered laundromat, past a bus stop where 2 teenagers sat sharing a pair of headphones. He kept his eyes on the woman with the cart. She had moved a few feet down the sidewalk and had stopped to rearrange something inside the cart, pulling out a folded blanket, refolding it, tucking it back down beneath a plastic bag. The care she took with that blanket, the tenderness of it, made something inside him ache. He was maybe 20 feet behind her now. He could see the frayed hem of her coat. He could see the way one of her shoes was held together with a wrap of silver tape around the heel. He could see her breath in the cold air. And then, without warning, she turned her head slightly, glancing over her shoulder as if she had sensed someone behind her. Marcus froze. Their eyes met for a fraction of a second. And in that fraction, everything he had spent 8 years telling himself came apart like wet paper. Her eyes were the color of strong tea, warm brown with a ring of amber near the pupil. He had spent his entire childhood looking into those eyes. He had seen them in the rearview mirror on the way to school. He had seen them across the kitchen table on Sunday mornings. He had seen them fill with tears the day he graduated from college. And he was seeing them now, on the face of a woman pushing a cart down a broken street in Queens. She turned away quickly, too quickly. She lowered her head and pushed the cart forward with new urgency, her shoulders rising up around her ears as if she were trying to disappear inside the coat. Marcus did not move. He could not move. His briefcase felt suddenly heavy in his hand, filled with contracts and passports and business cards that meant nothing at all. He watched her walk away. He watched her turn the corner, and then he began to follow her. He kept his distance. He didn't want to frighten her. He didn't know what he wanted, honestly. He didn't know what he was hopping to find or hopping not to find. He only knew that his legs were moving without permission, that his heart was pounding against his ribs, that the polished lights of Midtown suddenly felt 1,000 miles away. She led him down a side street lined with boarded storefronts, then across an empty lot where the weeds grew waist-high through cracks in the concrete, then along a chain-link fence that ran beside an old freight rail line. Marcus had grown up in this neighborhood, but he did not recognize this part of it. Or perhaps he had simply never bothered to look at it. The woman finally stopped beneath the shelter of a highway overpass, where the concrete met the earth at a sharp angle and formed a small alcove hidden from the wind. Marcus stopped too, staying back near a rusted dumpster, watching. She parked the cart against the wall and began to pull items out of it with practiced hands. A folded piece of cardboard for a floor. The blanket she had rearranged so carefully. A small metal tin that might have held food. A battery-powered lantern that flickered weakly to life when she pressed a button on its base. She sat down on the cardboard. She pulled the blanket around her shoulders. And in the pale glow of that lantern, Marcus finally allowed himself to really see her face. It was thinner than he remembered. The cheekbones were sharper. There were new lines around the mouth, deep grooves carved by years he had not been there for. But the shape of her jaw was the same. The way she held her chin was the same. The small dark mark just beneath her left ear was the same. It was his mother. It was Ruth Whitfield, and she was living under a bridge. Marcus felt his knees go weak. He reached out and steadied himself against the dumpster, breathing hard through his nose, trying not to make a sound. This could not be real. He had wired money every single month for 8 years. He had spoken to her on the phone as recently as 3 weeks ago, when she had told him she was doing just fine, that the weather had been kind, that she had made a peach cobbler and taken half of it to Mrs. Alvarez down the hall. She had told him not to worry. She had told him to focus on his work. She had told him she loved him. And now she was sitting on a piece of cardboard under a highway, wrapping a torn blanket around her shoulders in the fading light. Marcus stood in the shadow of the dumpster for what felt like an hour but was probably closer to 2 minutes. His mind kept trying to reject what his eyes were showing him. There had to be an explanation. This was a mistake. This was a woman who looked like his mother. His mother lived in the apartment on Ashford Street, the same apartment where she had raised him, the same apartment where he had wired the rent every month directly to the property management company that his brother Elijah had set up years ago. His mother was fine. She had told him she was fine. He had spoken to her voice. He knew her voice. He knew her laugh, but he also knew her eyes, and the eyes he had just seen were hers. He took a slow step forward, then another. He did not want to startle her. He did not want to be wrong. He did not want to be right. He wanted more than anything to turn around and get back in his sedan and pretend that he had never taken this detour. But some part of him, the part that had once been an 11-year-old boy standing beside a hospital bed listening to a doctor explain what a heart attack was, that part of him kept moving forward. She had her back to him now, her body curled slightly toward the lantern for warmth. He could hear her humming softly. It was a tune he recognized instantly, though he had not heard it in nearly 30 years. It was the lullaby she used to sing to him when he could not sleep after his father died. He remembered every note. He remembered the way she would rub small circles on his back while she sang. He remembered the way her voice would grow softer and softer until he drifted off. And now she was humming that same tune to herself, alone under a bridge, warming her hands against a battery-powered lantern. He could not hold it in any longer. He stepped out from behind the dumpster and walked toward her, his shoes crunching softly on the gravel. She turned her head sharply, her eyes wide with the practiced fear of someone who had learned to be afraid of footsteps in the dark. She began to pull the blanket tighter around herself, her free hand moving quickly toward the cart as if to defend it. Marcus stopped a few feet away. His voice, when he found it, came out cracked and small. "Excuse me, ma'am. Do I know you? I'm sorry, but you look so familiar." She stared at him. For a long moment she did not answer. Her eyes searched his face, and Marcus watched her expression shift through a dozen small stages. Fear first, then confusion. Then something that looked like the beginning of recognition. Then a kind of terrible sadness that he had never seen on any human face before. And then finally a mask. A blank, careful, unreadable mask that came down over her features like a curtain. "You need to walk away from here," she said quietly. "Please, just go." Her voice was rougher than he remembered, thinner, but it was hers. There was no mistaking it now. Marcus felt tears rising in his eyes, and he did not try to stop them. "But your eyes," he said. "I've seen those eyes before." She looked away. She looked down at the ground. She looked at the lantern. She looked anywhere but at him. "Please, sir," she said. "I don't want any trouble. I don't have anything worth taking. Just leave me be." Marcus took another step forward. He set his briefcase down on the gravel. He knelt slowly, careful not to loom over her, and when he spoke again, his voice was barely more than a whisper. "Mom, is that you?" The word hit her like a physical blow. Her whole body flinched. Her hand flew to her mouth, and a small broken sound escaped her throat, half sob and half warning. "Don't say that name out loud," she whispered. "Not here, not ever." Marcus felt something cold move through his chest. Not ever. What did that mean? Why not ever? He looked at her more carefully now, and he saw things he had missed in the first shock of recognition. There was a fatting bruise along her jawline, yellow and green at the edges. There was a carefulness to the way she held her left arm, as if it had been hurt and had not fully healed. There was an exhaustion in her that went far beyond cold or hunger. It was the exhaustion of someone who had been keeping a secret for a very long time. "Mom," he said again, and this time his voice broke completely. "What happened to you? Who did this?" She shook her head. Tears were rolling down her cheeks now, cutting clean lines through the dirt on her skin, but she was still shaking her head. "You shouldn't be here," she said. "You shouldn't have come back. If he finds out, you know." Marcus felt his stomach drop. "If who finds out, Mom? Who?" She did not answer. She only looked at him, and in her eyes he saw the same fear he had seen 100 times as a child, on nights when the bills came due and there was nothing in the bank account, on mornings when the landlord knocked too loudly at the door. It was the fear of someone who had learned that speaking the truth out loud could cost her everything. Marcus reached out slowly and took her hand. It was cold, so cold, and it trembled inside his own. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Marcus knelt on the gravel, holding his mother's cold hand between both of his, and Ruth sat perfectly still, as if any movement might break something she had spent years carefully holding together. The lantern flickered between them. Somewhere above, a truck rumbled across the overpass, and the sound echoed down through the concrete like distant thunder. Marcus finally lowered himself the rest of the way to sit beside her on the cardboard. He did not care about his suit. He did not care about the meeting in the morning. He did not care about anything except the woman beside him and the terrible weight of what he was beginning to understand. "Mom," he said softly, "I need you to talk to me. I don't understand any of this. I sent money every month. I spoke to you 3 weeks ago. You told me you were fine." She closed her eyes. A fresh tear slid down her cheek. "That wasn't me on the phone, Marcus." His head snapped toward her. "What?" She did not open her eyes. She just shook her head slowly, as if admitting it out loud was costing her something she could not afford to lose. "It hasn't been me for a long time," she whispered. "A very long time." Marcus felt the ground shift again, the same way it had shifted when he first saw her face in the amber light of the sunset. He tried to speak, but no words came out. His mother finally opened her eyes and looked at him, and there was something in her expression now that had not been there before. It was not just fear anymore, it was grief. A grief so old and so deep that Marcus could not imagine how she had carried it alone. "Your brother," she said, "Elijah." Marcus went completely still. "What about Elijah?" Ruth pressed her lips together. Her chin trembled. She looked out toward the empty lot beyond the overpass, at the weeds moving in the wind, at the last purple light draining out of the sky. "He came to me," she said quietly, "about 7 years ago, not long after you left. He was in trouble, Marcus. He owed some people money, bad people. He was scared. He said he needed a place to stay for a little while, just until he got back on his feet." Marcus felt his chest tight. He said nothing. He let her talk. "I let him move in," she continued. "Of course I did. He was my son, your brother. What was I going to do, turn him away? At first it was fine. He was quiet. He was trying. He said he had a plan, but the plan never came. The money never came back. And after a few months, he started asking me for things. Small things at first. Could he borrow the debit card? Could he have the PIN? Could he handle the mail so I wouldn't be bothered? Could he set up the direct deposit for the money you were sending because it would be easier?" Marcus felt his jaw tight. He knew where this was going. He had known it on some level from the moment he had recognized her face. "And I said yes to all of it," Ruth said, "because I trusted him. Because he was my son, because I thought I was helping." She paused, and when she spoke again her voice was even softer. "And then one day I asked him for the debit card back. I wanted to buy a birthday gift for Mrs. Alvarez down the hall. He said no. He said he was handling everything now and I didn't need to worry about it. And that was when I knew." Marcus closed his eyes. He could see it all so clearly now. He could see how it must have happened, month by month, small compromise by small compromise, until his mother had woken up one morning to find that she had somehow become a prisoner in her own apartment. "When did he put you out, Mom?" Ruth flinched at the word. She did not answer right away. She looked down at her hands, at the fingerless gloves, at the wedding ring she still wore even though his father had been gone for nearly 30 years. "About 3 years ago," she finally said. Marcus made a sound that was not quite a word. 3 years, 3 years. He had spoken to her, he thought, dozens of times in 3 years. He had wired money. He had sent Christmas gifts. He had asked her how she was doing, and someone had told him she was fine. "Who was I talking to?" he asked. "Whose voice was that?" Ruth looked at him then, and there was something almost apologetic in her eyes. "His girlfriend," she said, "Danielle. She sounds like me on the phone. She always has." Elijah figured out early on that as long as she kept the calls short, you would never know. Marcus stared at her. He had spoken to a stranger. For 3 years, he had wired $10,000 a month into an account he thought belonged to his mother. He had spoken to a woman he had never met. He had asked her about peach cobbler and Mrs. Alvarez and the weather in Queens. And every single time, his real mother had been sleeping under a bridge. Marcus did not remember standing up. He only realized he was on his feet when he felt the cold air hit his face and heard the gravel shift beneath his shoes. He was packing now, back and forth in the small alcove beneath the overpass, one hand pressed to his forehead, the other clenched so tightly around nothing that his knuckles ached. Ruth watched him from the cardboard, the blanket still wrapped around her shoulders, her eyes tired and wet and afraid. "Marcus," she said softly, "please, sit down." He stopped packing. He looked at her, and in that moment all the anger that had been rising inside him seemed to collapse into something else, something worse. He walked back to her and knelt down again, and this time when he took her hand, he pressed it against his cheek and held it there. "I'm so sorry," he whispered. "I'm so sorry, Mom. I should have come home. I should have come home so many times." Ruth reached up with her free hand and touched his hair, just the way she used to when he was small. "Don't do that," she said. "Don't blame yourself." Marcus shook his head against her palm, but I do blame myself. I sent money because it was easier than showing up. I told myself I was being a good son because I could pay for things. I never once flew home to check, not one single time in 8 years. Ruth's hand stilled against his hair. Marcus, she said quietly, listen to me. Your brother is a grown man. He made his own choices. This is not your fault. Marcus lifted his head and looked at her. Then why do you look so afraid, Mom? Why did you tell me not to say your name out loud? What is he going to do if he finds out I know? Ruth was quiet for a long moment. She looked out again toward the empty lot. The wind had picked up, and it was moving her gray hair around her forehead in thin strands. When she spoke again, her voice was very small. He told me if I ever tried to contact you, if I ever showed up at your office or wrote you a letter or went to the police, he would tell everyone I had lost my mind, that I had run off, that I had been sick for years and refused help. He said he had already told people that. Neighbors, the building manager. He said no one would believe me, and I was so tired, Marcus. I was so tired and so ashamed. I didn't know how to explain it. I didn't want you to know your brother had done this. I didn't want you to hate him. Marcus felt something raw and hot rise in his throat. He swallowed it down. He forced himself to breathe slowly. Mom, he said, look at me. Ruth looked at him. I'm going to make this right, he said. Do you understand me? I'm going to make this right, and no one is going to hurt you ever again, but I need you to come with me. Right now, tonight, I need you to leave this place. Ruth's eyes filled again. She glanced at the cart, at the blanket, at the small metal tin, at the flickering lantern. She had built a life inside these things, Marcus realized. A small, fragile, invisible life. And leaving it, even for something better, would be terrifying. He softened his voice. There is a hotel in Midtown, he said. A good one. Warm, safe, quiet. You will have your own room. You will have a hot bath and a hot meal and a bed with clean sheets. And in the morning, I am going to call every attorney I know. I am going to take back everything he took from you. But tonight, right now, all I need is for you to stand up and come with me. Please, Mom, please. Ruth looked at him for a long time, then she nodded just once, just barely, but she nodded. Marcus stood and helped her to her feet. She was so light. That was the thing that struck him most in that moment. She weighed almost nothing. He had lifted heavier briefcases. He wrapped his coat around her shoulders, the fine wool coat he had bought in London 2 years earlier, and he watched her sink into it as if she had forgotten what warmth felt like. She looked up at him, small and gray and tired inside the enormous black coat, and she gave him a smile that broke his heart clean in half. Your father would have been proud of you, she said. Marcus could not answer. He simply took her hand and led her out from under the bridge. They left the cart behind. Ruth kept only the small metal tin, which she pressed against her chest with her free hand as if it contained something precious. Marcus did not ask what was in it. He would ask, eventually, but not yet. He pulled out his phone and called the driver back. Then he called the hotel and asked for 2 connecting suites on a high floor. Then he called his personal assistant in London and told her in a voice she had never heard him use before to cancel every meeting on his calendar for the next 2 weeks, every single one, and to not put anyone through to him, not anyone. Do you understand me? Yes, sir, she said. And then she asked very quietly, sir, is everything all right? Marcus looked at his mother, small and silent beside him, waiting patiently at the edge of the overpass like a child on the first day of school. No, he said. Nothing is all right, but it will be. The sedan pulled up at the corner 10 minutes later. Marcus opened the back door himself and helped his mother inside. She moved slowly, carefully, as if she were afraid of scratching the leather. The driver, a man named Anthony who had worked for Marcus for 6 years, said nothing. He simply glanced in the rearview mirror once, met his employer's eyes, and understood everything he needed to understand. He put the car in gear and pulled away from the curb without a word. Ruth sat very still in the back seat, the tin still pressed against her chest. She looked out the window at the passing streets, at the lights of the bodegas, at the neon signs of the check cashing places, at the yellow glow of the street lamps reflecting off the wet pavement. Marcus watched her watch the city. He wondered when the last time she had ridden in a car had been. He wondered when the last time anyone had opened a door for her had been. He wondered 100 things, and he did not ask any of them. He simply reached across the seat and took her hand again, and this time she did not pull away. They rode in silence over the bridge and into Manhattan. The skyline rose up ahead of them, glittering and cold and impossibly bright, and Marcus watched his mother's face in the reflection of the window. Her eyes were wide. Her lips were slightly parted. She looked like a child seeing the ocean for the first time. And he realized with a fresh stab of guilt that she had probably not seen the skyline this close in years. Maybe not since he had left. The hotel doorman opened the door for them without hesitation, though Marcus saw the flicker of surprise in his eyes when Ruth stepped out. Marcus met his gaze evenly and slipped him a folded bill. The doorman nodded once and turned his attention to the next car. Inside the lobby, Marcus kept his hand at the small of his mother's back and guided her past the front desk. He had already arranged everything by phone. The general manager, a woman named Priya whom Marcus had known for years, was waiting for them near the elevators with a discreet nod and a set of key cards in a small leather envelope. She did not ask questions. She simply pressed the elevator button and said quietly, "Everything is ready for you, Mr. Whitfield. If there is anything else you need at any hour, please call me directly." Marcus thanked her. Ruth said nothing. She was staring at the marble floor, at the enormous vase of white orchids on the concierge desk, at the soft, warm light spilling down from the chandelier above. When the elevator doors closed, she finally spoke. "I'm not dressed for this place, Marcus." He looked at her. "Mom, it is my hotel. Well, not literally, but I have stayed here 100 times. You are dressed exactly right because you are with me." She did not answer, but she squeezed his hand. The suite was on the 42nd floor. Marcus opened the door and stood back to let her enter. Ruth stepped inside slowly, one careful step at a time, and stopped in the middle of the sitting room. There was a fireplace with a low fire already burning. There were floor-to-ceiling windows looking out over the park. There was a bowl of fresh fruit on the coffee table, and a tray with a covered plate that Marcus knew, without lifting the lid, contained a bowl of chicken soup and a slice of buttered bread. He had asked Priya for something simple, something a person could eat when their stomach had been small for a long time. Ruth turned in a slow circle. She looked at the fireplace. She looked at the windows. She looked at Marcus. And then she began to cry. Not the small, careful tears she had shed under the bridge. Full tears now, deep tears, the tears of a woman who had been holding her breath for 3 years and had finally been allowed to breathe. Marcus crossed the room and wrapped his arms around her. She was so small inside his coat. He held her while she cried, and he did not say anything because there was nothing to say. After a while she pulled back and wiped her eyes with the sleeve of the coat, and she gave him a small, embarrassed smile. "I'm sorry," she said. "Look at me, making a scene." Marcus shook his head. "There is no scene, Mom. There is only you and me, and a bowl of soup. Would you eat something?" She nodded. He led her to the couch. He lifted the lid from the tray. The steam rose up between them, and Ruth closed her eyes and breathed it in as if it were the finest perfume in the world. She ate slowly. She ate carefully. She ate the way people eat when they have learned that food can disappear. Marcus sat across from her and watched her eat, and he did not touch anything on the tray for himself. When she was finished, she set the spoon down and folded her hands in her lap and looked at him. "Marcus," she said, "there is something I need to tell you. About the tin." He glanced at the small metal container she had set beside her on the couch. "All right," he said. She reached for it. She held it in her lap for a moment. And then she opened the lid. Inside the tin were papers. Marcus had expected almost anything else. A photograph, maybe. A piece of jewelry. A lock of hair from someone she had lost. But not papers. He leaned forward on the couch as his mother lifted them out one at a time, unfolding them carefully with fingers that still trembled from the cold. The papers had been folded and refolded so many times that the creases had gone soft, and the ink was smudged in places where rain or tears had touched them. But they were legible, and what they said made Marcus's blood run cold. The first paper was a printout of a bank statement. His bank statement. The one for the account he had set up to wire money to his mother every month. Only the address on the top of the statement was not his mother's address on Ashford Street. It was a post office box in a neighborhood Marcus did not recognize. He looked up at his mother. Where did you get this?" Ruth folded her hands in her lap. "About a year after he put me out," she said quietly. "I went back to the apartment, just once. I waited across the street until I saw him leave, and then I used the spare key I still had. I don't know why I did it. I just wanted to see it. I wanted to sit on the couch for a few minutes. I wanted to remember what my own home felt like." Her voice caught. She swallowed. "And while I was there, I found a stack of mail on the kitchen table. Bills, statements, letters, and I saw your name on one of them, and I saw the address at the top. And I knew." Marcus looked down at the statement in his hands. The amount at the top read $10,000 deposited on the first of the month. He had wired that money to what he believed was a joint account he had set up in his mother's name years ago, back when he had first started sending significant amounts. He had assumed, without ever checking, that the account was still hers. He had assumed, without ever asking, that the statements were still going to her. He had never once logged in himself. He had never once called the bank. His brother had told him years ago that he had helped set it up, that everything was fine, that Ruth didn't want to be bothered with online banking, that it was easier this way. Marcus had believed him. Marcus had been busy. He set the statement down and looked at the next paper. It was a copy of a lease agreement. His mother's apartment on Ashford Street. Only the tenant listed on the lease was no longer Ruth Whitfield. It was Elijah Whitfield. The change of tenancy had been dated 4 years ago. His mother had not signed anything transferring the lease. Her signature at the bottom of the document was not her signature at all. Marcus had seen his mother's handwriting his entire life. He had seen it on birthday cards and lunch notes, and the labels of every jar of preserves she had ever put up. And the signature on this lease was a careful, patient forgery. Close enough to fool a landlord who had known her for 20 years and did not look too closely, not close enough to fool her son. Marcus felt his hand begin to shake. He set the lease down carefully on the coffee table, as if it might catch fire if he held it too long. The next paper was a handwritten letter, his mother's real handwriting this time. The date at the top was more than 2 years old. It was addressed to him. "Dear Marcus," it began. "If you are reading this, then something has happened to me, or I have finally found the courage to send it, though I do not know if I ever will. I am writing this because I need someone in the world to know the truth, even if that someone turns out to be only myself. Your brother has taken my home. He has taken my name from the bank. He has taken my voice on the telephone. He has told the neighbors I am sick. He has told the building I have gone to live with family in the South. He tells me every day that no one will believe me if I try to tell the truth, and I am afraid he is right. I do not want you to hate him. He is still your brother. He is still my son. But I am so tired, Marcus. I am so cold, and I miss you more than I know how to say. If you ever come home, please look for me. I will not be far. I promise I will not go far. Love always. Your mother." Marcus finished reading the letter and did not move for a long time. He sat with the paper in his lap and stared at his mother's handwriting, at the small, careful loops of the words "love always," at the way she had signed her name at the bottom with the same flourish she had used to sign his report cards when he was 8 years old. He felt something break inside him, not sharply, slowly, like a beam that had been carrying too much weight for too long finally giving way. Ruth watched him. She did not say anything. She waited. And when Marcus finally looked up at her, his eyes wet and his jaw tight, she reached across the coffee table and put her hand over his. "I never sent it," she said gently. "I never had the courage, but I kept it. I kept it because I wanted to believe you would come. And you came, Marcus. You came." Marcus did not sleep that night. He sat in an armchair in the sitting room of his own suite next to Ruth's, the connecting door left slightly open so he could hear her breathing. He had helped her run a bath, laying out a soft hotel robe and slippers on the bed, and he had waited on the other side of the door until he heard her settle into the water. He had heard her cry again then, but softly, the private kind of crying a person did when they were finally alone and safe enough to feel everything at once. He had not gone in. He had let her have that. When she had come out, clean and warm and wearing the robe like it was a coronation gown, he had tucked her into the bed and sat beside her until she closed her eyes. And now he sat in the dark of the next room, with the papers from the tin spread across the coffee table in front of him, and he began to make plans. By 6 in the morning he had made a list. He had not written any of it down. He did not need to. He would remember every single item on it for the rest of his life. First, an attorney. Not the attorneys who handled his business affairs. Someone who specialized in elder abuse, in financial exploitation, in the specific kind of quiet crime that families committed against each other behind closed doors. Second, a doctor. A private physician who could come to the hotel that morning and examine his mother without questions. He wanted to know about the bruise on her jaw. He wanted to know about her left arm. He wanted to know how 3 years of sleeping outdoors had affected her heart, her lungs, her joints. Third, a private investigator. Someone who could quietly document everything before Elijah knew anything was wrong. Bank records, phone records, the identity of the woman named Danielle who had spoken to him on the phone in his mother's voice. Fourth, a place to live. Not the hotel, not forever. A real home, somewhere Ruth chose. Somewhere with a garden if she wanted one. Somewhere near her friends if any of them were still around. Somewhere she could feel like herself again. And fifth, and this was the one he sat with the longest, he needed to decide what he was going to do about his brother. He did not know yet. That was the truth. Part of him wanted to fly to Ashford Street that very morning, walk up the stairs to the apartment, knock on the door and let Elijah see his face. Just see it. Let him understand in a single silent moment that the years of quiet theft were over, that the woman on the phone was not going to fool anyone anymore, that every dollar was going to be counted, and every signature was going to be examined, and every neighbor who had been told a lie was going to be told the truth. But another part of him remembered a boy of 7, sitting on the floor of a small living room, building a tower out of blocks. That boy had been Elijah. Marcus had been 4, and Elijah had let him knock the tower down, over and over, laughing every time, patient in the way that only an older brother could be patient. Marcus did not know how the boy who had built that tower had become the man who had put their mother out on the street. He did not think he would ever fully understand it. But he owed it to that boy, and to himself, to at least try to look him in the eye before he decided what came next. At 7 in the morning, Marcus made his first call. It was to a woman named Sylvia Rhodes, an attorney whose name had been given to him years ago by a colleague whose father had been the victim of a very quiet fraud committed by a very trusted nephew. Marcus had never called her before. He had filed her name away the way he filed away all names, in case they were ever needed. He was glad now that he had. Sylvia answered on the second ring. Her voice was calm, low, unsurprised, as if she had been receiving early morning calls from broken sons for her entire career. Marcus explained the situation in 5 sentences. Sylvia listened without interrupting. When he was finished, she asked only one question. "Where is your mother right now, Mr. Whitfield?" Marcus told her. "Good," Sylvia said. "Keep her there. Do not let her go back to that apartment. Do not let her speak to your brother, even on the telephone. Do not confront him yourself. Not yet. I will be at your hotel by 9. We have a great deal of work to do, and we are going to do it in the correct order. Do you understand me?" Marcus understood. He made his second call at 7:30. It was to a physician named Dr. Naomi Chen, who ran a small private practice on the Upper East Side and who occasionally made house calls for patients who preferred privacy. She agreed to come to the hotel at 10. His third call at 7:45 was to a private investigator named Reuben Ellis, whom Marcus had used exactly once before, in a matter involving a former business partner. Reuben was a former detective who had left the force after 20 years and who now specialized in matters that required both discretion and patience. When Marcus explained what he needed, Reuben was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, in a voice that was very careful and very kind, "Mr. Whitfield, I am very sorry, but I am also going to say something to you that I mean sincerely. It is a good thing you came home. Some sons never do." Marcus thanked him and hung up the phone and walked to the window and watched the sun rise over the park. Behind him, in the next room, his mother was sleeping in a real bed for the first time in 3 years. Sylvia Rhodes arrived at 9 o'clock exactly. She was a tall woman in her late 50s with silver hair cut short and a leather portfolio tucked under one arm. She shook Marcus's hand firmly, and then she asked to meet Ruth alone before anything else was discussed. Marcus led her to the door of his mother's suite. Ruth was awake now, sitting up in the bed with a cup of tea in her hands, still wearing the robe. She looked at Sylvia with the wary, careful eyes of a woman who had learned to be careful of strangers. Sylvia sat down in the chair beside the bed, folded her hands in her lap, and spoke to Ruth for nearly an hour. Marcus did not listen at the door. He gave them that time. When Sylvia finally emerged, her expression was gentle but her eyes were sharp, and Marcus knew, without her saying a single word, that his mother had told her everything. Dr. Chen arrived at 10. She examined Ruth in the bedroom while Marcus waited outside. When she came out, she sat down with Marcus at the small table by the window and spoke to him in the quiet, professional voice of a woman who had delivered difficult news many times. "Your mother is malnourished," she said. "Her blood pressure is high. Her left wrist was broken at some point in the last 2 years and never set properly. It has healed at a bad angle. She has the beginnings of arthritis in both hands, made significantly worse by cold weather. Her lungs are clear, which is a small miracle. Her heart is strong, which is a larger one. She is not in immediate danger, but she needs rest, she needs food, she needs warmth. She needs, most of all, to feel safe. And she will need physical therapy for that wrist and possibly a small surgery, though that can wait." Marcus wrote nothing down. He did not need to. He thanked Dr. Chen and asked her to return every day for the next week. She agreed. On her way out, she paused at the door and looked back at him. "Mr. Whitfield," she said, "your mother told me you found her yesterday. Is that correct?" Marcus nodded. Dr. Chen was quiet for a moment. Then she said in a voice that was very soft, "Most people do not find them. Most people never look." And she left. Reuben Ellis arrived at 11. He was a short, broad-shouldered man with kind eyes and a very quiet way of moving. He shook Ruth's hand with a gentleness that surprised Marcus, and then he sat down at the coffee table with the papers from the tin spread out in front of him. He asked Ruth a series of careful questions, not about what had been done to her. Sylvia had already gathered that. Reuben asked about times and dates and small forgotten details. When had Elijah first mentioned the girlfriend named Danielle? When had the mail started being redirected? When had the neighbors stopped waving at her in the hallway? What was the name of the property manager who had accepted the forged signature on the lease? Ruth answered as best she could. Reuben wrote none of it down either. He simply listened and nodded and asked another question. When he had finished, he stood up and shook Ruth's hand again, and he told Marcus quietly that he would have preliminary findings within 72 hours. Then he left. By noon, the suite was quiet again. Marcus sat with his mother in the sitting room and they ate lunch together at the small table by the window. Ruth ate a little more today than she had the night before. That was a small victory and Marcus counted it. Halfway through the meal, Ruth set down her fork and looked at him. "Marcus," she said. "Yes, Mom. What are you going to do about your brother?" Marcus had known this question was coming. He had been asking it of himself for 12 hours. He set his own fork down. "I don't know yet," he said honestly. "Sylvia has a plan. It involves a great deal of paperwork and very little confrontation, and it will take time. She wants to secure everything before he knows anything is wrong. She wants to make sure you are protected, and that the money that was taken can be traced, and that the lease can be reversed. And she wants to do all of it before he has a chance to hide anything or run. I trust her. I'm going to do what she tells me to do." Ruth nodded slowly, and after that, Marcus was quiet for a long moment. After that, he said, "I want to see him. I want to sit down across a table from him and look him in the eye. I don't know what I will say to him. I don't know if I will forgive him. I don't know if he will even ask me to, but I want to see him because I need to understand. And because I think, somewhere underneath everything he has done, there is still a person there. And I owe it to that person to give him a chance to speak before I decide what to do with the rest of my life and yours." Ruth reached across the table and took his hand. "He is your brother," she said quietly. "He will always be your brother. Whatever you decide is right. I will stand behind you. But Marcus—" "Yes, Mom, do not let him back into my life. Not until I say so. And if I never say so, do not let him back at all." Marcus felt something ease in his chest. It was the first thing she had asked for herself, out loud in a very long time. "I promise," he said. Ruth squeezed his hand once and then she picked up her fork again and she went back to her lunch. And Marcus watched her eat in the warm light of the window, and he understood that this was what his life was going to look like now. Not the boardrooms, not the flights, not the covers of magazines. This. A small table by a window, a woman with silver hair, a cup of tea, a promise kept. The investigation took 11 weeks. Sylvia Rhodes worked with a precision that Marcus admired, and Reuben Ellis worked with a patience that Marcus came to depend on. Together, they uncovered every wire transfer, every forged signature, every phone call, every small careful theft that Elijah had committed over the years. The woman named Danielle turned out to be exactly who Ruth had said she was, and when Reuben quietly approached her, she agreed to speak on the record in exchange for immunity. She had been coached, she said. She had been paid. She had not known at first how bad it truly was. By the time she had known, she had been too afraid to leave. Marcus felt no anger toward her. He felt only a tired, quiet sadness for everyone his brother had drawn into the shape of his own choices. When the paperwork was ready, Sylvia moved in a single afternoon. The bank accounts were frozen. The lease was reversed. Elijah was served with a civil suit at the door of the Ashford Street apartment while a locksmith stood behind the process server, waiting to change the locks. Marcus was not there. He had asked to be, but Sylvia had refused. "Not yet," she had said. "Later if you still want to." And Marcus had trusted her. He spent that afternoon at the small townhouse he had purchased for Ruth in a quiet neighborhood in Brooklyn, 3 blocks from a park with a rose garden. She had picked it herself, walking through the empty room slowly, touching the walls, standing for a long time at the kitchen window that looked out onto a small backyard. "This one," she had said. "This is the one." And Marcus had bought it that same week. 2 months after the locks were changed, Marcus finally saw his brother. It was in a small conference room in Sylvia's office, and it was arranged as a mediation, not a confrontation. Elijah sat on one side of the table with his own attorney. Marcus sat on the other side with Sylvia. Ruth was not there. She had chosen not to come. Elijah looked older than Marcus remembered, thinner. His hair was more gray than black now, and there was a tremor in his hands that had not been there 8 years ago. He would not meet Marcus's eyes for the first several minutes. When he finally did, there was no anger in his face. There was only a kind of hollow, exhausted shame. "I don't have anything to say that will fix this," Elijah said quietly, "so I'm not going to try." Marcus nodded. "That's probably wise," he said. They sat in silence for a long time, and then Elijah spoke again. "She was going to lose the apartment," he said. "I know that isn't an excuse, but it's the truth. I was in trouble. I moved in to help her, and then I couldn't leave, and then I couldn't stop, and every month it got a little worse, and I kept telling myself I would fix it before you came home. And then you didn't come home, and I told myself that meant I still had time." Marcus felt his jaw tight. He forced himself to breathe. "I know," he said. "That part is on me too." Elijah looked at him then, really looked at him, and Marcus saw something in his brother's face that surprised him. It was gratitude. Small and tired and undeserved, but real. Marcus did not forgive him that day. He did not know if he ever would. But he agreed to a settlement that kept Elijah out of prison, on the condition that he entered a treatment program, that he repaid what could be repaid on a schedule that would take him the rest of his working life, and that he never contacted Ruth again unless she asked for him. Elijah agreed to all of it. When he stood up to leave, he paused at the door and looked back at Marcus. "Thank you," he said. Marcus did not answer. He simply nodded once, and then Elijah was gone. That evening, Marcus drove to the townhouse in Brooklyn. Ruth was in the kitchen, humming the lullaby to herself, stirring something on the stove. The windows were open. The air smelled like garlic and thyme. There was a small vase of flowers on the table, cut from the rose garden 3 blocks away, arranged by hands that had grown steadier over the last 2 months. She turned when he came in and smiled at him. "Marcus, you're just in time. Set the table, will you?" He set the table. He sat down across from her. They ate together in the warm light of the kitchen, and they talked about small things, and Marcus watched his mother laugh, really laugh, for the first time in 8 years. After dinner, they sat on the back porch and looked at the sky. It was a clear night. The stars were faint, the way they always were in the city, but they were there. Ruth reached over and took his hand. "Marcus," she said quietly. "Yes, Mom. Do you remember what your father used to say when things were hard?" Marcus smiled. "He used to say, 'We are still here.'" Ruth nodded. "That's right. We are still here." And Marcus sat with his mother in the warm summer night, and he understood, finally, what his father had meant. Money had built the townhouse, but love had built the home. The years he had lost could not be given back, but the years that were left could be spent well. And he intended from that night forward to spend every single one of them at a small table by a window with a woman he had almost forgotten how to see, and a promise he intended to keep. If this story moved you, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe for more stories like this one. And if there is someone in your own life you have not called in too long, a parent, a grandparent, an old friend, please pick up the phone tonight. You never know how much time is left, and you never know how much a single visit can mean until you are the one standing under a bridge hoping someone will come. Share your thoughts in the comments below. I read every one. And I would love to hear your story.